April Ajoy is a hilarious content creator and podcast host who shines a light on harmful, toxic, and sometimes just weird traits of American evangelicalism. She grew up as an evangelist kid steeped in Christian nationalism, and she worked in conservative Christian media. That's where she saw the harm of those ideologies firsthand. She's still a Christian today, but she uses her platform to expose the dangers of Christian nationalism while promoting a more inclusive version and vision of the faith. I'm so excited to have her here. April, hi, how are you? And let me show everyone your fantastic book right here, Star-Spangled Jesus. How are you doing? And for those who don't know you as well, can you tell everyone about yourself? And I don't hear you
Oh,
because
that's
of
because I had my
something.
own mic muted. That was
There
a
we go.
user error.
It's all good.
Yeah. No, I'm doing well. A little about me, I guess. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, currently with my spouse and two daughters. And other than writing this book for the last 2 years, I make content on TikTok and Instagram, funny sketches, because humor is how I cope. And I just try to poke fun at the sometimes glaring holes and harm in Christian nationalism and American evangelicalism, which are very closely knit, by the way.
So how steeped in Christian nationalism were you? Because there were things I read about in the book that I've only known you as a content creator. I did not know about your life before you started making videos, and I was surprised by, like, you're not just a passive bystander in some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I like to joke that what I do now is like my form of repentance for what I used to do and say. Yeah, so my dad was an evangelist, so we traveled all over the country and the world. He would preach, I would sing, my brothers would sing, and then my mom, we'd all sing before he preached, so it was a family affair. Um, on the more nationalist fronts, we believed, which was, it's a very common belief still, and I think people that weren't raised religious or aren't in those circles don't realize how deeply embedded these beliefs are. But we believed that America was founded as a Christian nation, despite it not being, but we believed that. We were very much believed in American exceptionalism, that God had supernaturally blessed our country, and that's why we won all of our wars. That's how our country even came to being. We kind of ignored the whole genocide of indigenous people. In that way, it was like, oh no, we were just spreading the light and gospel of Christ.
The
And
Civil War means we won twice.
right. Yeah. Right. And we totally ignored the fact that people use the Bible to justify slavery too. It was like, no, it was the good Christians that abolished slavery. So we believed this very, whitewashed American exceptional version of history. And so, but since we believed that God had his hand through all of, our great feats, then when we started seeing what in our mind was a moral decadence in America with abortion and homosexuality, and you had people like Jerry Falwell. He blamed 9/11 on gays and abortionists and the ACLU and probably atheists, and then like things like Hurricane Katrina. There were a lot of pastors that blamed that on homosexuality and like our moral decline. And so our answer for that was, well, we need to make America a Christian nation again, or at least like we still, it is a weird place to be, because we believed we needed to get America back, like take America back for God, but it was also still a Christian nation at the same time. And depending on the day, it was, somewhere in the middle.
It's kind of strange that I wonder what your thoughts are on the fact that the idea of Christian nationalism, that term, has only cropped up in the public mind over the past, I don't know, year or two. But you understood the concepts of it way before
Yeah.
then. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are now when you see that kind of everywhere. And maybe I was surprised about this when it came to Project 2025. That's the sort of thing that would only seem to matter in our circles, like the
Yeah.
church state separation circles. What's been kind of a good thing has been watching it go beyond that. And the mainstream media and more people who are not in our circles tend to know what that is and they don't like it. And the same thing seems to be happening with Christian nationalism. I'm just curious, yeah, what was it like when you saw these ideas you grew up with become so much bigger, at least when it comes to awareness in the country?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really glad that people are recognizing it. I think one of the more insidious things about Christian nationalism is that it hides in plain sight as just regular American evangelicalism. Because when I was in the movement, I would not have said I was a Christian nationalist. I would have said I was just being a good Christian, by love God, love people, vote Republican, and that those were all kind of intertwined. Like I genuinely thought God wanted me to make America a Christian nation, and then eventually the world. There's this holy quest in that movement, and we are 100% serious about it. And so I'm really glad that people are recognizing it. I wish we had recognized it sooner, because now we're like to a really scary part of the plan with Roe v. Wade being overturned and Project 2025 on the horizon. But this is something that I wanted when I was in it, but it never seemed possible. And now that I'm on the other side of it and I see how dangerous this ideology is, it's a really scary place to be, to see how close we are for a lot of Christian nationalists are already in power. Like, you see Ryan Walters in Oklahoma putting Bibles in schools, and he wants to be, the driving force for that to happen in schools in every state. And yeah, so I'm happy that it's mainstream, but I'm also like I'm upset that it has to be mainstream. And the reason it's mainstream is because they're gaining power and
Sure.
momentum.
I want to go back. There are some aspects of your childhood I definitely want to go back to, but for those who are not familiar, how on earth do you grow up in that? And then what is it that spurs you to say, I don't know about all this. I don't think this is right. How do you escape when you're that deep into it?
Yeah, so I think most Christians who are in it, and it's not everyone. I think there's some grifters for sure and bad faith actors. But I do think most everyday people who genuinely just think they're being good Christians believe that they're doing the right thing. They believe that they're doing good and that they're not harming people. And I would hear people say too, like, why are you wanting to take away rights from gay people? And the way that I had justified it in my head was that, well, that is a sin. And if I take their ability to sin away from them, then they'll be more likely to become Christian and be saved and not go to hell or whatever. But then at a certain point, as I met gay people in real life, including my own brother, who came out to me when he was in his 20s, it just became very apparent that, like, okay, some of the beliefs that I held were wrong. Like, just what I believed about gay people, that we were taught that they either had demons or they were choosing to be gay based on some demonic influence. And I realized that sounds crazy, like, if you're not religious, but that is a very common belief still to this day. And the more that I interacted with people that I was taught were evil, and not just gay people, but like Democrats even, or atheists, you and lead you down a path of destruction. And when I met people like that and realized that they were really kind and in many ways kind of lived out the teachings of Jesus better than a lot of Christians I knew, it just kind of made me reevaluate a lot of my own beliefs, because I did not want to cause harm. And then when I realized that my beliefs and what I was doing was causing harm, I had to really reconcile with that.
What was it that made you be able to differentiate between my beliefs about these other people, gay people, atheists, what have you? My beliefs are the problem here. And it's not just Satan being super deceptive this time by making these people seem way nicer than I ever thought possible.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it was in 2016, I 2015 and 2016 in the election, the primaries, when Trump first came on the scene. I remember in the 90s, all of the Christian Republicans around me saying that character mattered when it came to Bill Clinton. Like, I mean, that was drilled into me. Like, Democrats and liberals and leftists, they don't care about character, because if Bill Clinton would lie to his wife, what would he do for the American people? And when I saw that completely go out the window when it came to supporting Trump, and like people weren't just supporting Trump, like they were championing him, especially when like these Trump prophets came on the scene and were saying like, oh, God told me that Trump's going to win. Trump is God's chosen to lead America back to righteousness. Like the alarm bells in my head were going off. I was like, what is happening? Like I spent 4 years feeling like I was constantly being gaslit because like I don't see it. Like I'm reading the gospels and the teachings of Jesus and what you say are our values as Christians. And then y'all are on the same hand promoting a serial adulterer, a racist, a misogynist, a sexist, a grifter, a narcissist, someone who literally says he's never had to ask God for forgiveness, which in that belief system is like Christianity 101. And that was just really eye-opening. And then when I started questioning it, not even in a I was still
like, you guys, what are we doing here?
Yes, like I was still evangelical, but I was like, what's happening? And like me just questioning it, I had people tell me my late father would be disappointed in me because I wouldn't support Trump. And so I started getting that kind of vitriol and demonization pointed at me. And so then I kind of started questioning because I knew my own heart. I was like, I know that I'm coming at this from a place of really just wanting to do the right thing and I don't understand and I'm getting all this hate for it. It kind of made me look back at times that I had demonized other people and been like, maybe I was wrong to do that. And they actually had good hearts too.
I mean, this is something a lot of, people like me were also pointing out. It's the hypocrisy between purported Christian values, in big quote hands, and everything about Donald Trump. And yet, as we know, roughly 80% of white evangelicals supported him in 2016 and 2020.
Mhm.
And I get politically, strategically, he's good for some of the things that they want, at least on paper. But again, like you're saying, come on, I was taught this. I was told this about Bill Clinton. You guys seem to be turning your backs on the things you told me.
Mhm.
How come more people in your mind, how come more Christians who grew up in that environment didn't see it? And I don't think any of them would have necessarily voted for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, but I am surprised more of them didn't just stay home in that election.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many factors that go into that question. I think there's a lot of people who are pastors on a large scale or a small scale or ministers where they have every reason not to rethink their beliefs. Um, there's a lot of indoctrination and I don't think a lot of people outside of those circles realize how all consuming that world is. It is a huge echo chamber because we're taught to be in the world, not of it. And not only are you hearing a certain message every week from the pastor on the pulpit, but you're watching Fox News, you're listening to Rush Limbaugh, you're watching TBN or CBN, like every media that you consume is just reinforcing your worldview. And anything that goes outside of that, if Trump did one brilliant thing in his campaign was he demonized any news that went against his narrative as fake news. And we had already been like the system, the belief system itself, we were already ingrained to doubt any secular thing. If it didn't come from a Christian, we were already suspicious of it. Scientists, professors, atheists, Democrats. So there's already a distrust from people because we believed that Satan was hiding behind every corner and leading you astray. And you're basically taught to white knuckle your faith because the world is out to get you and they want you to doubt yourself. And so I think when Trump came on the scene, you had, it seemed like it was more younger, like millennials or Gen Z that were able to spot the hypocrisy a little bit more. And I just think people that are more set in their ways, they have more reason to just double down than to re-examine anything because so much of that belief system is so tightly knit that if you pull one little string, like not supporting Donald Trump when all these other pastors are, it kind of all unravels and starts this whole existential crisis. And I think that's just really scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a giant Jenga building, and he's kind of the center at the bottom. And as soon
Yeah.
as that gets knocked out, everything else starts to crumble. Um, There was one thing I saw in your book that I was genuinely shocked by. You said, okay, so in 2016, the facade starts to crumble a little bit there during that election. But by 2020, um, I'm curious where you were in that stage of the deconstruction, if you will. And I would love for you to tell people about what happened during the insurrection, which sounds like a very shady ass question. But you were watching it on TV unfold, horrified, as many
Mhm.
people were. But your reaction to it with you and your spouse was actually one I was not expecting. What was
Mm.
that all about?
Yeah, so we in 2020, I did vote for Joe Biden. He was the first Democrat I ever voted for because of everything that I'd been taught about Democrats. So I was already like I had deconstructed that much already. But really up until the pandemic, we were still going to church and we would have still considered ourselves evangelical then as well. But I remember watching the January 6th, 2021. And there were a lot of Trump prophets still that were saying things like, oh, God told me that Trump was going to win and God didn't lie. The Democrats just stole it, which was just like, okay, so are the Democrats more powerful than God? They somehow like snuck one by him. Um,
I had the same thought when it came to the hurricanes
yeah.
recently in Florida, where they're like, Democrats are controlling the weather. It's like, I thought you guys said that was a God thing. Or who
Oh,
knew
I know.
Democrats were so powerful that they could outdo God on this one? Impressive. But yeah, go ahead with the
Yeah, yeah.
insurrection.
No, I know. It's so wild. But yeah, I was watching the news unfold live during the what we now would call it insurrection. And initially, I, I hadn't fully reconciled like my own part in Christian nationalism at this point. Like I knew some of my beliefs were wrong, but I just kind of felt lied to, and as opposed to being a participant. And when I was watching it, at first I was like, "Oh my gosh, who are these crazy people? They have Jesus flags. They're praying. There's a noose. They're chanting hang Mike Pence. Like who are these violent people? Like these are not my people. I don't know who these people are. Like this is crazy." And then like as the news began to unfold and they started identifying different people in the crowd, my spouse Beecher and I recognized two people. One I knew from my dad's church, and the other Beecher knew from church as well back in Georgia. And we just kind of had this epiphany went off. I was like, these are my people. These are freaking my people. And then I just realized, crap, I was a Christian nationalist this whole time. The whole time. And it was just a very humbling, terrifying realization that if I, had my path gone slightly different, I was like, man, I could have been at the Capitol that day.
You could have been wearing the shaman headgear and
Oh my
everything.
gosh, I I know.
That's wild that you realized you weren't invited to the party at that point.
Yeah.
So now today,